In the forgotten corners of the ancient world, long before Wi-Fi signals, iced lattes, or even the everyday miracle of socks, humanity whispered about beings too powerful, too strange, to simply be called neighbors. Picture this: the desert winds of Mesopotamia whipping through endless dunes, carrying whispers of legends. Temples now broken and crumbling like ancient Jenga towers rise from the sand, their walls scarred by time, their secrets barely holding on. And through these ruins, stories. Stories about visitors who literally fell out of the sky. They had a name, a sharp, cutting name that somehow survived thousands of years, stubborn like a meme that refuses to die. The Anunnaki. For some, they were bedtime stories, legends told to kids to explain why life sucked, why harvests failed, why the goats just weren't cooperating that season. For others, they were gods, boss-level NPCs running humanity's very first DLC. And for a small group of dangerous overthinkers, they were cosmic tourists, aliens, interstellar engineers who looked at humans crawling through the mud and said, yeah, this needs an upgrade. For millennia, their stories were carved into clay tablets and etched into stone. Think of it as humanity's first blockchain. Impossible to delete, impossible to edit, and insanely confusing to read without an archaeologist. These carvings didn't just sit there, they haunted. They demanded that every new generation ask the same burning question. Who were the Anunnaki, really? Were they sacred rulers shaping the destiny of humankind? Were they ancient astronauts beta-testing civilization like it was some buggy early access game? Or were they simply metaphors blown way out of proportion, like astrology, but with extra homework and way less glitter? Welcome, night travelers. I'm your guide tonight, and we're about to unlock one of history's longest-running cliffhangers. Forget your school textbooks. This isn't standardized testing. This is the Forbidden Expansion Pack, the lore nobody wanted you to binge. Tonight, we dive into the truth, or at least the speculation, behind the Anunnaki. Here's where the plot twist kicks in: the Sumerians. These weren't just cavemen plus one. These people built shockingly advanced cities out of mud and math. They invented writing, aka the reason you get essays and homework. They tracked the skies with such precision that modern astronomers still blink twice. And while doing all that, they kept casually dropping story after story about sky beings they swore walked among them. And it wasn't just a one-off bedtime story. Nope, the Sumerians would not shut up about it. The Anunnaki were their obsession, their Spotify top 1% replay artist. Every king list, every temple inscription, every, hey, let's scribble on some clay for fun moment, boom, Anunnaki cameo. Which raises a bigger question: what were they actually seeing? What was happening that felt so overwhelming, so advanced, that the only language they had for it was gods from the heavens? Some historians wave it off with a shrug. Relax, it's just mythology. But others lean forward, lower their voices, and whisper. Or maybe it was something else. Something mainstream history just couldn't process. Something that still leaves fingerprints in the dust of ruined cities. The truth? Nobody knows. Not the archaeologists. Not the scientists. Not even the conspiracy TikTokers who spend 12 hours a day making green screen videos with red circles. But the mystery? Oh, the mystery is alive and kicking. It hides in the grooves of clay tablets. It lingers in ziggurats, those massive step pyramids that basically scream. Yeah, this was built to impress someone up there. Close your eyes for a second and imagine standing there. The air is thick with silence. Not the city noise we know, no car horns, no buzzing electricity, no endless notifications. Instead, you hear the soft lap of the Euphrates River, the rustle of reeds, the bleating of goats settling down for the night. And then, above the hushed city, looms a tower of mud brick and asphalt, rising stair by stair toward the heavens. That's not just architecture, that's ambition carved in clay. So here's my advice: keep an open mind. Because what if the past holds surprises stranger than your favorite sci-fi flick? What if the Anunnaki weren't bedtime stories at all, but eyewitness reports, compressed into myth because ancient humans didn't exactly have the vocabulary for extraterrestrial biogenetic engineers? Maybe the answers are closer than we think. Maybe they've been hiding in plain sight, scratched into stone, waiting like ghosted DMs. And maybe, just maybe, this isn't really about gods. Maybe it's about us. About where we came from, and why we're still asking these questions millennia later. So dim your lights. Close your 87 Chrome tabs. Grab a snack. Or just let your fan hum in the background like cosmic white noise. Because the journey? It begins now. The night is long. The ruins are waiting, and the Anunnaki? Yeah, they're already watching the replay. Climbing the steps of the ziggurat was no casual stroll. Each stair had been smoothed by countless forgotten feet, merchants, priests, maybe even kings themselves. Step after step, their eyes fixed on the temple at the summit, the place where heaven and earth supposedly touched. This wasn't just an architectural flex. For the Sumerians, the ziggurat was more than a giant mud brick mountain. It was a ladder, a cosmic escalator, the literal link between mortals on the ground and gods in the sky. If Home Depot sold stairways to heaven, this was the deluxe edition. Archaeologists are still debating what these colossal structures really did. Were they temples, giant symbolic mountains designed to bring priests closer to their gods? Or were they multi-purpose skyscrapers, part temple, part grain silo, part observatory, part government office? Imagine if your city hall, church, and NASA all shared the same building, and it was made of mud. The temple at the very top was said to be the earthly residence of the gods, a literal Airbnb for divine visitors. And the gods these people had in mind? The Anunnaki. Stand at the base and tilt your head upward, and you can almost imagine it. Priests in white linen robes climbing the moonlit stairs, chanting into the night, their voices echoing down the sleeping streets. To the Sumerians, these weren't symbolic rituals. They believed their gods were real, demanding, powerful, and occasionally cranky. The Anunnaki weren't abstract concepts. They weren't metaphors for, oh wow, nature is strong. No, these beings had personalities. They fought, they schemed, they had needs, and they demanded monuments the size of small mountains. Now, imagine the cost of that devotion. Decades of backbreaking labor under the sun, thousands of workers hauling bricks and tar, all to honor beings who might never physically touch the staircases built for them. It's like grinding an entire video game raid for a boss that never even spawns. And yet, the intensity feels different, as if the Sumerians weren't just trying to please their gods. It was like they were paying off some kind of cosmic debt, interest compounding every generation. Because the shadow of the Anunnaki wasn't just the physical shadow of a temple. It was a weight over the city's soul, a constant awareness that somewhere above, in the starlit loft of the cosmos, something or someone was watching. Stand at the foot of the structure and let your imagination run. The night wind brushes your face. The air is heavy with clay, incense, and mystery. You can't help but wonder, what kind of faith does it take to build something so massive? And then, staring into the dark staircase, another question sneaks in. Who exactly were they building this for? You turn away, curiosity leading you through the narrow, silent maze of streets. Torches flicker. The city is asleep, but something pulls you toward another building, its doorway yawning open against the night. Inside, the faint smell of clay, dust, and ancient knowledge. You've entered the House of Tablets. A library, a school, a vault for the city's collective memory. Shelves line the walls, stacked with baked clay tablets covered in wedge-shaped symbols, the very first written words. You pick one up. It's cool, heavy, gritty in your hand. Your fingers trace the marks. And suddenly, the myths come alive in your mind. Stories of arrival. Stories of beings descending from the heavens. The texts don't describe abstract metaphors. They don't say the vibes were divine. They say, the Anunnaki came down from the sky. Now pause. Imagine being Sumerian. You don't have a word for alien. No vocabulary for spaceship. You see something glowing in the sky, moving like nothing you know. What do you call it? A shining chariot? A starship? A god? The Sumerians had a word, dinger, a symbol shaped like a star. It meant God, but it also meant the shining ones. Beautiful, poetic, and ambiguous enough to keep scholars arguing for centuries. Were the Anunnaki like Zeus or Odin? Mythic figures born from faith, personifications of natural forces? Or were they actual beings, flesh and bone, who stepped out of something real and physical? That's the question baked into every line of cuneiform. Mainstream historians play it safe. They'll tell you the Anunnaki were just the major deities of the Sumerian pantheon, children of the sky god Anu. Their name? Usually translated as princely offspring or royal bloodline. Just gods, just religion. Nothing more. But when you stand there, in the silence of the clay library, holding a tablet that whispers about shining beings descending from the heavens, tell me honestly, does that feel like just mythology? Or does it feel like humanity's oldest cliffhanger? On the surface, the Anunnaki were described as top-tier gods, the executive suite of the divine. But when you're standing here, thumb brushing the rough grooves of a clay tablet, that explanation feels too neat, too short. The text doesn't read like fairy tales. It reads like itineraries, agendas, a logbook of beings who showed up here on purpose, with plans. You move toward another shelf. Instead of flat tablets, you find tiny stones covered in impossibly fine carvings. Cylinder seals, ancient ID stamps rolled across clay to leave a signature. Most are routine, kings bowing before gods, animals, symbolic motifs. But one replica stops you, the infamous VA-243. It shows seated figures, and next to them, a star encircled by smaller orbs. Archaeologists shrug. That's the sun, surrounded by decorations. Don't overthink it. But alternative theorists squint harder. They start counting. 1, 2, 3, until suddenly it looks suspiciously like a diagram of the solar system. Now, let's be clear, you wouldn't want to navigate space with this thing. Ancient astronomy was more mood board than GPS. But the idea is intoxicating. What if it wasn't symbolic? What if it was a chart? A map passed down from visitors who didn't just drop in for story time. They landed, took notes, and got to work. Because the myths don't describe random magic. They describe councils in the sky, decisions, journeys, crews. They describe the Anunnaki not as abstract lightning bolts wearing crowns, but as people. Powerful, glowing, terrifying, maybe, but people who arrived, settled, and began building. Think about it. If luminous beings descended from the sky today, we wouldn't call them gods. We'd call CNN. We'd call TikTok. We'd have 4K drone footage, live streams, Reddit AMAs, and 50 conspiracy podcasts before they even removed their helmets. The Sumerians had no Wi-Fi, no cameras. They had clay, and so they used the most sacred, formal words they knew to describe what their eyes couldn't ignore. That's why standing in this dusty tablet house feels electric. Scholars tell you it's all mythology, a narrative toolkit to explain floods, crops, social order. And sure, part of it was. But the details go beyond poetry. They mention long journeys, orbits, numbers of crew. That doesn't sound like bedtime stories. That sounds like minutes from a mission briefing. So here's the dilemma. Were the Sumerians inventing gods to make sense of chaos? Or recording encounters with beings so advanced, God was the only available word? You set the seal back and pick up another tablet. This one shifts tone. Less about arrival, more about the drama afterward. And if you imagine the Anunnaki as serene, all-knowing figures, spoiler alert, you're in the wrong mythology. Because these stories, they're messy. At the heart of the chaos are two brothers, Enlil and Enki. Enlil first. Picture him as the stern commander, the storm god, the lord of command. In Sumerian texts, he's the authority on Earth under the distant sky god Anu, COO of Planet Project, obsessed with order, chain of command, and results. If things got noisy, workers grumbling, humanity improvising, Enlil was the guy rolling his eyes and threatening to shut the whole experiment down. Now meet his half-brother, Enki. If Enlil is corporate discipline, Enki is chaotic innovation, god of water, knowledge, craft. The ultimate R&D lead who loves clever hacks and mischief. His domain wasn't thunder, but the Apsu, the mysterious underground ocean of fresh water. And his personality? Always one, what if, away from breaking protocol. The dynamic writes itself. Enlil drafts strict SOPs, Enki finds loopholes. Enlil demands silence. Enki invents music. One enforces, the other experiments. And right in the middle of their sibling rivalry? Humanity. Some stories say the Anunnaki themselves grew tired of endless labor. Mining, farming, building. It was heavy work. So Enki proposed a radical fix. Create helpers. Something adaptable, tough, and just smart enough to follow instructions. Mix divine essence with clay, and voila, humans. Depending on which text you read, we are either a holy miracle or history's first workforce automation project. A cosmic life hack. And of course, once we show up, everything changes. Because humans don't just obey. We invent. We complain. We dream. We make memes. Enlil looked at humanity and saw noise, chaos, unpaid overtime. Enki looked at the same species and saw possibility, potential, maybe even allies. The tension between them escalates with every tablet, commands, warnings, punishments, cheats. In one version, when Enlil pushed for a hard reset via flood, Enki slipped humanity a survival cheat code. Order versus chaos, law versus mercy, and suddenly the ziggurat outside makes new sense. Every brick feels like part of that argument. Every step like a line in a negotiation. It's not just mud piled into a mountain. It's architecture as debate. As if the city itself was trying to balance two cosmic brothers pulling history in opposite directions. So who were the Anunnaki? Gods? Engineers? Aliens? Or simply characters in humanity's first attempt to explain the unexplainable? The tablet in your hand grows heavier with the question. The dust around you waits for an answer. But maybe the point isn't certainty. Maybe the point is that 3,000 years later, you're still asking, still reading, still climbing invisible stairs toward the sky. Because whether you believe they were myths, metaphors, or visitors, one truth remains. The story of the Anunnaki refuses to die. And maybe, that's the clearest evidence of all. Enki wasn't just a trickster. He was the god of wisdom, magic, invention, the original multitasker. Scientist, artist, engineer rolled into one. If Enlil was stubborn command and control, Enki was flexible, improvisational, the guy who'd MacGyver his way out of any cosmic mess. To Enlil, problems were obstacles to crush. To Enki, problems were puzzles to rewire. One wanted silence and obedience. The other wanted creativity and survival. And this tug of war didn't just play out in sibling arguments. It echoed across the fate of humanity itself. Because while Enlil grew increasingly irritated by the noisy human population, Enki schemed to protect them. What we're seeing is the world's first sibling rivalry scaled up to planetary consequences. A family feud, but the stakes weren't car keys or inheritances. The stakes were the destiny of Earth. And right in the middle of their clash, something called the Me. Weird name, but crucial. The Me were described as divine decrees, cosmic blueprints, the fundamental codes that made civilization tick. Think of them as god-tier cheat codes. Embedded inside the Me were everything from principles of kingship and laws to the secrets of carpentry, metallurgy, even music and wisdom. Here's the strange part. In some myths, the Me weren't abstract concepts at all. They were tangible objects, things you could hold, wear, even steal. Imagine USB drives of divine software scattered across temples. Whoever controlled the Me controlled civilization itself. At first, Enki was their guardian. But then comes one of the most chaotic side quests in ancient mythology. The goddess Inanna, granddaughter of Enlil, visits Enki, gets him completely wasted, and tricks him into handing over dozens of Me. She then smuggles them back to her own city, Uruk. Translation: she stole the cheat codes of civilization during a drunk uncle moment. Tell me that doesn't sound like a myth written by the same people who invented hangovers. This story shows a side of Enki that feels uncomfortably human. Brilliant, yes, but also flawed. Vulnerable. A god who could get tricked. But let's step back. These sibling rivalries weren't harmless squabbles. They had ripple effects. You pick up another tablet, and suddenly you're reading about the Igigi, the so-called junior gods. They were tasked with backbreaking labor, digging canals, managing irrigation, doing the kind of endless grunt work that powered Mesopotamian life. After decades of digging in brutal heat, they revolted. Tools thrown down. Fires lit. They marched on Enlil's home, shouting, "We quit." Classic Enlil move? Anger. He wanted punishment, swift and harsh. Classic Enki move? Creativity. He suggested an alternative. If the workers won't work, let's create new workers. Not divine, but biological. Resilient, adaptable, programmable. Humans. And here's the kicker. In these myths, humanity wasn't born from divine generosity or a sacred spark of love. We were created to settle a labor dispute. Not exactly the inspirational TED Talk you were hoping for, huh? Our origin story framed as corporate management's response to a worker strike. Management versus labor, and we're the compromise. It's dark. It's cynical, but also hauntingly relatable. Because that means our species began as a practical solution to keep the cosmic project running. And the weight of that idea still hangs in the silent air of the tablet room. You carefully put the tablet back, but your eyes are drawn to something else. A tall clay prism, standing like a weird, four-sided trophy. Its surfaces are covered in dense lines of cuneiform, not poetry but lists. It looks suspiciously like an ancient spreadsheet. This is the Sumerian king list, one of the strangest artifacts ever dug from the desert. You run your fingers along the etched words, and the opening line hits like a thunderclap. Kingship descended from heaven. Pause. It doesn't say kingship was invented. Doesn't say it evolved from tribes or councils. It says it descended. Like a technology. Like a directive from HQ. Authority falling from the sky. Then the list begins. The first king, Alulim of Eridu. His reign? 28,800 years. You blink. Did you misread? Nope. The next king, Alaungar, ruled for 36,000 years. The list keeps going, calmly assigning reigns of 40,000 years like it's nothing. In total, 8 kings ruling 5 cities, spanning 241,200 years. For comparison, the average modern politician can barely survive a 4-year term without scandal. Imagine 29,000 years of meetings, paperwork, and remembering where you parked your chariot. By year 3,000 you'd run out of hobbies. By year 10,000 you'd just be wandering the palace asking, "Where did I put the flood tablet?" The numbers are absurd, almost comical, clearly mythic, clearly symbolic. And mainstream historians agree. The king list is a real artifact, yes, but these pre-flood reigns belong in the mythological category. The prism we're holding is one of several copies, with the well-blundell prism being the most complete. Scholars treat it as a mix, some parts real history, some parts pure legend. But here's the unsettling part. Why write it this way? Why anchor real dynasties to impossible numbers? Why insist, over and over, that kingship didn't start on Earth, but fell from the heavens? The room grows heavier. You realize the Sumerian king list isn't just about kings. It's about legitimacy, power, where authority comes from. And it whispers the same theme that runs through all these myths. Humanity didn't build civilization alone. Something or someone helped, guided, interfered. And so you're left with a question echoing across thousands of years. Were these numbers just exaggerated myths, or encoded memories of beings who didn't measure time the way we do? Beings who could stretch centuries the way we stretch weeks? Outside, the desert winds sigh against crumbling walls. Inside, the tablets sit quietly, daring you to decide. Myth, metaphor, or history in disguise? So maybe the Sumerian king list isn't history in the way your teacher meant it. Those absurd reign lengths? They could be political flex, numbers so big they scream. Our kings are heaven certified. Don't question it. Imagine being a shaky ruler in 2000 BCE. Your nobles are plotting, your cousin wants the throne, so you pull out a tablet claiming your position goes back 250,000 years and was literally signed off by the gods. Instant credibility. PR move of the millennium. But then another thought creeps in. What if it's not metaphor? Ancient astronaut theorists don't see poetry, they see data. They ask, what if the first 8 kings weren't human at all? If you can live 50,000 years, then 28,800 isn't a myth. It's just a long career with terrible vacation days. And then the tablet drops its mic line. After the 8th king, the flood swept over. Boom. Cosmic reset. File wiped. Next line. After the flood, kingship descended from heaven again. New city, new rules, new patch update. And suddenly the reigns shrink, from tens of thousands to mere centuries. Eventually you hit names historians can actually verify, like Gilgamesh, clocking in at a modest 126 years. Still SUS, but closer to human. Why the change? Mainstream historians say, myths slowly blending into reality. Fringe thinkers say, policy shift. Pure-blood celestial rulers out, short-lived hybrids in. In that lens, the king list isn't fantasy. It's a genetic record of decline. You put the prism down, and the silence in the archive feels heavier. Shelves tower around you like dusty servers. Then your hand lands on a wide clay tablet, the Atrahasis epic. It's Mesopotamia's greatest hits: creation, crisis, flood. But reading it here feels less like literature and more like leaked files from a cosmic HR department. The story doesn't start with humans. It starts with gods doing hard labor. The junior gods, the Igigi, are basically cosmic interns, digging canals, hauling dirt, keeping the lights on. After centuries of sweat, they go on strike. They torch their tools and march straight to Enlil's mansion demanding change. Enlil, predictably, is furious. Punishment mode engaged. But Enki, the god of loopholes and problem-solving, offers a wild fix. If the workers won't work, let's make new workers. Not divine, but engineered. Trainable. Replaceable. A species designed to handle the heavy lifting. And so, according to this story, humanity is born. Not out of love, not out of curiosity, out of labor negotiations. We're the replacement staff for the gods' walkout. Imagine explaining that on career day. Yeah, humans were basically created so irrigation projects didn't fall behind schedule. Dark? Absolutely. But it fits the tone. These gods don't act like perfect ideals. They argue, scheme, make mistakes, and still build civilizations. They feel less like unreachable deities and more like overpowered managers with questionable ethics. The king list and Atrahasis line up perfectly here. The pre-flood kings reign forever. Then the flood wipes the slate clean, and humans 2.0 show up to pick up the shovel. Myth or memory? Depends which playlist you're on. But the rhythm, create, escalate, reset, rebuild, keeps repeating like a cosmic loop. And then comes the twist that still makes historians sweat, the flood. Enlil pushes for total erasure. Enki secretly saves a remnant. Enter Atrahasis, the human who actually listens. He builds a boat, loads it with life, and survives the apocalypse while the rest of the world gets Control-Alt-Deleted. Afterward, the gods argue, then compromise. Humanity gets to stay, but under new limits. Lifespans shortened, growth capped, a balance between survival and silence. Step back, and you see the outline. Kingship descends from heaven. Humans appear as a workforce, and a flood draws the border between mythic rulers and recognizable history. Mainstream lens, symbolic storytelling. Fringe lens, encrypted record of contact. Either way, the ancients wanted this remembered, carved into clay like a blockchain you can't delete. You slide the tablet back, fingers coated in ancient dust. Outside, the wind hisses against stone, but in here, the air feels electric, like the story itself is still watching. Were the Anunnaki just gods of imagination, or supervisors who left their fingerprints on civilization? The tablets don't answer. They just whisper, "Keep looking." The council hall was burning with tension. The junior gods had just torched their tools, marched off the job, and basically invented the first labor strike in cosmic history. And Lil wanted blood. He was ready to punish them with storms and fury. But then, calm, clever, calculating, Enki stepped forward. The engineer, the problem solver, the cosmic negotiator. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He simply said, "Don't punish them. Replace them." And just like that, the air changed. Instead of thunder, there was silence. Instead of fear, curiosity. Enki wasn't talking about rebellion anymore. He was talking about a new species. Not divine, not immortal, but functional, disposable. Workers who wouldn't argue, wouldn't burn their shovels, wouldn't storm the boss's mansion. Workers designed for the task. Then he revealed the recipe. And here's where the story gets uncomfortably specific. First, clay, but not any old handful of dirt. This had to be taken from the sacred Apsu, the deep underground waters. Pure, untouched, a mixture of earth and the life-giving veins of the planet. Think of it as humanity's hardware, mud with a cosmic warranty. But hardware is useless without software. Clay alone can't follow instructions. It needed a spark, a mind. So Enki suggested something chilling: sacrifice a god. Extract his essence, his blood, his me, the spark of awareness. Mix that into the clay. That would be the operating system, the ghost inside the machine. And so it happened. A divine being, unlucky enough to draw the cosmic short straw, gave himself up. His essence was drained in a solemn ritual, not cruel but terrifyingly clinical. Blood and spirit merged with sacred clay. Flesh of the earth fused with memory of the heavens. The recipe was ready, but the process wasn't finished. This wasn't Frankenstein lightning bolts and stitched corpses. No, this was biotech. The mixture was divided into 14 portions. 7 male, 7 female. Each one implanted into the wombs of birth goddesses, the world's first surrogates. Imagine a cosmic IVF clinic, except the doctors were deities and the patients were the building blocks of civilization. They waited. The gestation period ticked by. And then, the tablets say, it was successful. The first humans were born. Not through miracle, not through romance, but through design. Project management, divine addition. You sit back, stunned. This isn't the rosy Genesis story of a god breathing life into dust out of love. This is darker, sharper, more industrial. Humanity wasn't crafted to be free. We were built to be useful, smart enough to follow commands, not quite smart enough to question the system. At least, that was the intention. And that thought lingers as you step outside into the Mesopotamian night. The marketplace smells are fading. The livestock noise is gone. Only dust and cool air remain. Overhead, stars burn in patterns that once guided farmers and priests. But now, every point of light feels like an eye. Watching, your gaze shifts back to the ziggurat. Before, it was a monument of faith. Now, knowing what you know, it looks different. Not a shrine, a tool, infrastructure, a headquarters for the gods' grand experiment. You begin to climb its massive staircase. The bricks are wide and steep, polished smooth by countless forgotten feet. No handrails, no safety nets. Ancient OSHA would have had a meltdown. Each step stretches your legs, pulls at your lungs. Below, the city spreads like a patterned carpet. Narrow streets, rooftop beds, faint glimmers of moonlight on clay. The higher you climb, the quieter it gets. The hum of life fades until all you hear is your own breath and the soft whistle of the wind. The silence feels alive, like the structure itself is listening. Each gust seems to carry voices, workers long dead, priests long gone. Maybe even echoes of those gods who ordered all this. Halfway up, you pause, catching your breath. Your chest tightens, not just from the climb, but from the weight of realization. If Enki's story is true, then the spark in your blood, the creativity, the rebellion, the dreaming, that isn't random. It's inherited, a leftover from that sacrifice god. Humanity isn't just labor. We are glitch and ghost, freedom coded into obedience. And so you climb higher. At the summit, the platform opens before you, empty now, but once crowned with a temple glowing with fire and ritual. Tonight, only stars blaze above it. They seem closer here, leaning in, curious. You exhale, staring at the horizon. The ziggurat no longer feels like stone. It feels like a bridge between clay and sky, between creation and rebellion, between gods who needed workers and workers who became something more. The tablets in the archive whispered it. The wind on these stairs confirms it. Humanity wasn't born to worship. Humanity was born to remember, and maybe, just maybe, to rewrite the script. The city fades into silence. Only the wind remains, soft, whispering, tugging at your clothes as you climb. Every step takes you higher, not just physically, but symbolically, leaving behind the dust and labor of humanity, moving closer to the realm of their supposed masters. Ziggurats were never tombs. Unlike the Egyptian pyramids, they weren't monuments to death. They were solid, layered, crowned with a temple at the top. To the Sumerians, that temple was a guest house for the gods, a kind of cosmic Airbnb where their divine patrons could stay when they visited. Faith saw it as sacred architecture, but through modern eyes, shaped by theories of ancient visitors, it begins to look like something else. Step by step, the structure reveals its strangeness. Wide terraces, flat platforms stacked on top of one another, a massive central staircase cutting straight into the heavens. Is this a mountain of faith, or a launch pad? The comparison is hard to ignore. Cape Canaveral, Baikonur, Kennedy Space Center, all echoes of the same design. Platforms meant not for pilgrims, but for ships. Even mainstream scholars admit the alignments are suspicious. Many ziggurats line up with stars, solstices, and planetary movements. Was it only for calendars and crops? Or were these alignments windows, launch windows? The temple at the top, they say, was just a place for offerings, food, drink, incense. But conspiracy theorists imagine something more: control panels, docking stations, maybe even fuel depots for chariots of the gods. You reach the summit. The temple itself is long gone, erased by thousands of years of rain and wind. But the platform remains. From here, the view is staggering. The Milky Way splits the sky in a glowing scar of light. The city below is a sleeping circuit board of clay houses, and the ziggurat under your feet feels less like a ruin and more like a forgotten device, an antenna, a power conduit, a monument of technology masquerading as religion. The Babylonians later called it the temple of the foundation of heaven and earth. Was that just metaphor or a literal description? You feel the wind shift, carrying a sharp ozone tang, like the aftertaste of lightning. For a moment, goosebumps race down your arms. You imagine storms gathering on the horizon, disasters from long ago replaying like static in the night air. The ziggurat doesn't answer. It only looms, stubborn and silent, holding its secrets like the stars above. You descend carefully, each step echoing in the stillness. The structure feels heavier now, not stone heavy, but truth heavy. At the base, your feet carry you back toward the archives, as though pulled by instinct. Inside, cool shadows welcome you again. Your fingers brush shelves until they land on a famous tablet, Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh. The symbols etched into its clay tell a story that rippled across cultures, across centuries, the Great Flood. Here, in Sumer and later Babylon, the tale was written more than 1,000 years before the Bible. Long before Noah's Ark, there was Atrahasis and Utnapishtim. Different names, same waters. A world washed clean. Humanity nearly erased. As you trace the cuneiform lines, the cause of the flood comes clear, and it isn't sin. It isn't wickedness or divine judgment for corruption. According to the tablets, the problem was noise. Humanity was too loud. The workers Enki had engineered multiplied, built, farmed, partied, argued, and the sound rose up like static into the sky. Enlil, the storm god, grew irritated. Not angry at evil, irritated like a landlord with noisy tenants. And so, the gods debated. Some argued for mercy, others pressed for silence. Finally, the decision was made: reset the system. Wipe the slate, drown the noise. The text grows vivid, black clouds gathering, the horizon swallowed, the world trembling as waters pour in from every direction. Rivers overflow, seas surge, rain lashes down in endless sheets. The gods themselves, the very beings unleashing it, are said to tremble at the scale of destruction. Yet one man is spared. Atrahasis, later called Utnapishtim, chosen not because he was holy, but because Enki whispered a warning. He was told to build a boat, vast and sealed with pitch, stocked with animals and family. The blueprint is inscribed right there on clay. Dimensions, decks, waterproofing. A survival manual carved millennia before Noah's Ark. The flood comes. Humanity drowns. The experiment nearly ends. But Atrahasis rides the storm, his vessel tossed for days, until at last it settles on a mountaintop. When the waters recede, he releases birds to find dry land. The world begins again. Standing in that quiet archive, you realize the chilling symmetry. Humanity was created as workers, disposable labor. Then humanity multiplied, became inconvenient, and almost faced deletion, like files cleared off a cosmic hard drive. Saved only because one god decided the noise wasn't so bad after all. You close your eyes. The tablets in your hands feel heavier than clay. They feel like mirrors, reflecting questions back at you. Were the gods of Sumer just mythic metaphors, or were they something more? Engineers, rulers, visitors who built, reset, and rebuilt again. And most haunting of all, if the flood was a reset once, could it be reset again? Enlil had officially had it. Humanity, in all its barefoot glory, had become way too noisy. Babies crying, markets yelling, goats screaming like heavy metal fans. It was chaos. Imagine trying to sleep with a stadium blasting 24/7 EDM below your window for a few thousand years. That was Enlil's life. Finally, he snapped. He calls a divine staff meeting. All right, enough. Let's wipe the board clean. Full system reset. One word, flood. The other gods look around like interns on their last coffee break. No one wants to argue with the boss who controls storms. They nod, swear an oath. No warnings, no leaks. Humanity? Deleted. Except Enki, our guy Enki, the cosmic engineer, the R&D department, the one who actually likes people. He's trapped, bound by the oath, but his conscience won't let him sit this out. So what does he do? Classic loophole. He strolls to Shurapak, stands outside Utnapishtim's reed hut, and whispers, not to Utnapishtim, oh no, but to the wall. Hey wall, maybe, just maybe, you should tell your owner to build a massive boat. Seal it with pitch, roof it tight, stock up on family, workers, and animals. Utnapishtim, conveniently on the other side, hears every word. The gods can't say Enki broke the oath. He technically just gave a TED talk to building materials. So the ark rises. As the last plank is hammered, the storm rolls in. Thunder, lightning, the sky cracks like glass. Oceans pour from above and below. It's total apocalypse mode. Even the gods panic, scrambling to higher heavens, whimpering like kids hiding under a blanket during a thunderstorm. 6 days, 7 nights. The world is drowned. Then silence. A silence so deep you can almost hear the clay tablets dissolving in the mud. But the ark survives. On a mountain peak, Utnapishtim tests the waters. Dove returns. Swallow returns. Raven flies off and ghosts him. Boom. Dry land. He opens the hatch, sacrifices an animal, and the smoke rises. The gods, who haven't smelled barbecue in a week, swarm the altar like frat bros at a free pizza stand. Then Enlil shows up, sees the survivors. Rage mode activated. His clean slate planet ruined. Enki steps in, cool as ever. Look, I didn't tell a human, I just had a chat with some construction materials. Totally legal. Then he adds, let's compromise. Keep humans, but add population controls. Less noise, less stress. Enlil grumbles, but signs off. Humanity continues, not out of divine love, but because Enki outlawyered his boss. You sit back, tablet in hand, realizing humanity exists thanks to a loophole, a boat, and some really persuasive barbecue smoke. Not exactly the hallmark version of creation, but the archives hold more than myths. Some tablets aren't stories at all, they're data dumps. Rows of numbers, planetary charts, star cycles logged with terrifying precision. Others detail beer rations, wages, even medical diagnoses. The Sumerians weren't just spinning tales, they were running the first hard drive. And cuneiform? Brutal. Each wedge a tiny Tetris block, carved into clay. Scribes spent decades training. Imagine doing algebra homework with a stick and wet mud. Makes your calculator app look like a miracle. Then the astronomy tablets hit you. Venus cycles, eclipses, lunar motions, tracked so accurately modern software can still confirm them. These weren't bedtime stories. They were science notes. Which begs the question, who taught them? Did they really just skywatch their way to NASA-level accuracy? Or were they logging data someone else handed down? Back outside, the ziggurat looms. Mainstream historians, it's a temple, a hotel for the gods. Fringe theorists, nope, that's a launch pad, a charging dock, a giant cosmic Wi-Fi router. Those terraces, those stairways, they look less like religious architecture, more like a tech platform waiting for a ship. And that's the tension, two readings of the same ruins. Sacred house or spaceport, bread and beer offerings or astronaut snacks. Either way, humanity stood at the foot of something massive, staring upward, convinced it connected us to the stars. Back in the archive, your hand drifts to another tablet. Not a myth this time, just data, charts, receipts, laws, and suddenly you realize, If the flood story is humanity's drama, these tablets are humanity's operating system. Myths told us why, numbers told us how. And maybe that's the real takeaway. If the Anunnaki were gods, they left us religion. If they were astronauts, they left us homework. Either way, we're still cramming for the exam, 5,000 years later. You set the tablet down. Outside, the Mesopotamian night hums. Above, the same stars blaze. And you wonder, maybe the flood wasn't the end at all. Maybe it was just the reboot. And the tablets? They're the cheat codes the universe forgot to patch. The achievements of Mesopotamia? Oh, they slap. Forget pyramids for a sec. These people basically invented the entire math system you use to fail algebra. Base, 60 numbers. That's why we've got 60 seconds in a minute, 360 degrees in a circle, and why your geometry teacher was secretly a Babylonian reincarnated. These stargazers weren't just squinting at dots in the sky going, oh, pretty. Nope, they built detailed star charts. They tracked Venus like it was their celebrity crush. They mapped Jupiter's backward motion like NASA interns running simulations in Excel. And the wild part? They could predict eclipses hundreds of years in advance. No TikTok, no telescopes, no NASA budget. Just clay tablets and vibes. Historians still argue about how they pulled it off. Some say advanced math models. Others say just centuries of obsessive sky watching. Either way, you're looking at a civilization flexing so hard. It's like they left cheat codes carved in clay. Now, the Anunnaki theory slides in like, yo, maybe they didn't figure this out alone. Maybe someone downloaded the knowledge. That's the conspiracy flavor. Did humans build this brainpower, or did Enki sneak us the cosmic USB drive? And of course, the family drama continues. And Lil, the grumpy commander, was all about secrecy. His vibe, humans are labor. Don't let them get too smart. Smart workers unionize. Smart workers ask questions. Smart workers invent TikTok and ruin everything. His motto? Keep them in the dark, let them dig canals, feed them just enough math to count sheep. But Enki? Oh, Enki's the rebel teacher. He's the kid passing cheat sheets during the exam. Legend paints him as the one who secretly slipped humanity agriculture, medicine, astronomy. Basically, he wasn't handing us fire like Prometheus. He was handing us calculators and medical textbooks. Enki's classroom was the entire Earth. So when you stare at those tablets, lists of plants with their uses, laws for trade, astronomical charts, you start to wonder, are we looking at centuries of human trial and error? Or is this a starter pack? Like, congrats, welcome to Civilization 101. Here's your agriculture patch, here's your legal system DLC, here's your astronomy expansion pack. It's almost too neat. Enough knowledge to build cities, manage resources, keep people alive. But not quite enough to launch a rocket back into space and go, yo, Anunnaki, we're coming for you. Suspicious? Yeah. Convenient? Also yeah. And just when you're processing all that, you step outside the tablet archive, and boom, the Guardians are waiting. Massive Lamassus statues flanking the city gates. To most historians, they're protective spirits. To the locals? Walking comfort blankets made of bull muscle, eagle wings, and human wisdom faces. Basically, the ultimate Pokemon fusion. Picture it, bull body, raw power. Eagle wings, divine speed. Human face, calm authority. These weren't random monster mashups. They were designed to scream. This city is guarded by beings you do not mess with. To everyday Sumerians, walking past them was like passing TSA with a bodyguard squad. You felt safer, holier, part of something bigger. But zoom out and think. If you've already heard that the Anunnaki were bioengineers, genetic experimenters, would it really shock you if Lamassu weren't just symbols, but prototypes? Hybrids? A flex to show, yeah, we can mix and match species. Don't test us. For mainstream history, Lamassu are art, guardians of thresholds. For the fringe crowd, they're receipts. Proof the Anunnaki didn't just play with clay and laws. They played with DNA long before CRISPR. And here's the wild part. Either interpretation works. To the ancients, these guardians meant, the gods are watching, you're safe. To us, they whisper, the gods were tinkering, and you might have been one of the projects. So you're left standing at the gate, dwarfed by winged bulls with human heads, staring at the stars these people charted with impossible accuracy, holding myths that sound suspiciously like science. And you can't help but ask, were the Anunnaki really gods? Teachers? Engineers? Or just aliens who got bored on a layover? Whatever the truth, the ruins don't answer. They just stand there, giant brick ziggurats, impossible numbers carved into clay, hybrid guardians at the gates, taunting you with mysteries older than history. And maybe that's the point. Whether gift, download, or grind, Mesopotamian knowledge feels less like the dawn of civilization and more like the first episode of a series we're still binge-watching. The cliffhanger? What else is still hidden in those broken tablets, waiting for the next person crazy enough to read between the lines? Magic or technology? In Mesopotamian myths, those are basically the same button with different labels. Take the Lamassu. To the museum crowd, it's a hybrid mascot. Bull body for strength, eagle wings for divinity, king's face for, I own this spreadsheet empire. But once you've heard the theory that these weren't just statues but prototypes of engineered guardians, the vibe shifts. That's not art. That's a flex. Welcome to civilization, now with built-in security software. Crack open more clay tablets, and it gets even weirder. The Enuma Elish casually drops that Chaos Mom Tiamat gave birth to a squad of monster mashups. Serpents, chimeras, hybrids that read like a rejected Pokemon lineup. Mainstream interpretation, symbols of cosmic chaos. Fringe interpretation, failed prototypes. Because if Enki and the birth goddesses could literally mix divine essence with clay to manufacture humans, why not beta test a few other species first? Maybe Homo sapiens wasn't the first success, just the one that didn't glitch. That's where the Apkallu, the seven sages, enter the story. Myths say they popped up before the Great Flood to teach humans farming, law, architecture, astronomy, basically rolled out the starter pack for civilization. But here's the kicker. They're often pictured as fishmen. Not a Marvel cosplay, but amphibious mentors from Enki's watery Apsu domain. Imagine being a Bronze Age farmer and your first STEM professor looks like Aquaman's tired cousin. So what happened? Early Sumerian texts described the Anunnaki as boots-on-the-ground management. By Babylonian times, they fade into symbolic wallpaper. Historian answer: climate shifts, wars, soul collapse, gods get rebranded. Fringe answer: they clocked out. Mission finished, gold mined, data gathered, time to vanish. Or they went remote work, hiding in mountains, orbit, or dimensions. Out of sight, out of archaeology. Zoom out globally, and deja vu hits. Egypt's Thoth looks like Enki's pen pal. India's Manu rides out a flood. Mesoamerican feathered serpents carry those infamous handbag symbols carved in stone, nearly identical to ones in Mesopotamian reliefs. Scholars say it's cultural diffusion or coincidence. Fringe voices say, same brand, different franchises. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the hype machine revs. Eric von Daniken writes Chariots of the Gods. Zacharias Sitchin claims the Anunnaki came from Nibiru, a rogue planet with a 3,600-year orbit, mined Earth's gold, and made humans as cheap labor. TV turned that into ancient aliens marathons. Academia responded with one giant collective facepalm. They point out mistranslations, cherry-picked symbols, and that not every starburst is a rocket exhaust. The fight isn't just about facts, it's about worldview. One side wants hard evidence, the other connects dots until they draw a UFO. But maybe the answer lives in between. Maybe these myths aren't literal history or random fantasy. They might be distorted memories of contact with an advanced culture, human or not, that early storytellers could only explain with divine language. No word for biotech. You call it a god sacrifice. No word for spaceport. You call it a temple where gods descend. No word for curriculum. You call it the sages taught us. That's why the tablets read like a suspiciously neat starter kit. Math in base, 60, hello, minutes and degrees. Astronomy charts accurate enough to predict eclipses, medicine recipes, law codes, crop records. Enough to run a city, not enough to build a spaceship. Useful upgrades, with a hard ceiling. Like a free trial of civilization where the leave the planet button is locked behind premium. Which circles back to the Lamassu at the gate. Maybe it's just a statue of strength and wisdom. Or maybe it was a product brochure for a security hybrid that once patrolled real streets. Either way, the message is clear: order lives here. Cross this line, and the firewall bites. And that's the itch these stories leave us with. Every generation remixes them. To farmers, the gods were rain managers. To priests, they were ritual bosses. To scholars, they're source material. To cable TV, they're aliens with tool belts. To us, they're TikTok-linked conspiracy fuel and Reddit rabbit holes. The story keeps respawning because it won't answer the only question we care about: what actually happened? So here we stand, on the ruins of ziggurats that could be temples or launch pads, staring at star charts etched on clay like cosmic cheat codes, squinting at fishmen sages who look suspiciously like lab assistants. The Anunnaki may be gone, or just offline, but their biggest invention still lingers: the human obsession with asking questions we can't stop asking. Maybe magic was just tech with better marketing. Maybe gods were teachers with bad HR policies. Maybe we're living in the user manual they left behind. Whatever the truth, it still does the job. Makes us look up at the night sky and wonder who wrote the first chapter of our story.